Speaking of my dream presidential ticket, 2016, Jeb Bush, Hillary Clinton. If you missed it, I made the announcement exactly 1 hour ago. With full reasoning, I mean, an irrefutable logic. But you know our old buddy Nate Silver at the 538 blog, the wonderkind that used to be the analyst of polls at the New York Times. Readers of the New York Times loved Nate Silver because he gave them comfort. He analyzed all the polls, and he accurately forecast an Obama re-election victory in 2012. Well, Nate Silver saw the handwriting on the wall and left the New York Times, and he's now doing his analyst magic at ESPN. Well, not just ESPN. He's got his own blog called 538. And he made a submission or a post yesterday. And the headline of Nate Silver's most recent post at his 538 blog is Jeb Bush too liberal to win the Republican nomination in 2016? On Tuesday, former Florida Governor Jeb Bush announced that he will actively explore a bid for the White House. While Bush has not yet formed an exploratory committee, he is running for president by any practical definition of the term. And if he proves to perform poorly in the invisible primary, i.e. failing to gather support among donors and influential Republicans, he could withdraw later on before the first votes are even cast. Now, what might those influential Republicans think of Bush? He has sometimes been critical of his fellow Republicans, having questioned the Republican partisanship and lack of tolerance for dissenting viewpoints. He's often staked out moderate policy positions on some issues, particularly immigration and education reform. But is Bush in the mold of John Huntsman and Rudy Giuliani, candidates who generated lots of buzz among the East Coast media elite but proved too moderate, i.e. liberal, for the Republican base? Or is Jeb Bush more like the past two Republican nominees, Mitt Romney and John McCain, who also were accused of being too moderate, i.e. liberal, but won their party's nomination? Can we study that paragraph here for just a second? This is Nate Silver, and if Nate Silver is anything, he's a liberal. It's not a factor here, though, but the one thing that's clear, Nate Silver is not a conservative, so we can't assume that he's got any pro-conservative bias here. This paragraph is amazing in trying to analyze where Jeb Bush falls in a chart of conservative identity among Republican presidential contenders. And there is a chart that accompanies this, but charts are very hard to translate in the spoken word. But the chart essentially looks at several Republican presidents and nominees: Chris Christie, Huntsman, Nixon, Condi Rice, Bob Dole, Jeb Bush, Susana Martinez, and ranks them on a number of factors as to just how conservative they are. For example, Ronaldus Magnus, Ronald Reagan, everybody thinks is a massive, big-time conservative, is probably right in the middle of the pack. Has a conservative rating in Nate Silver's chart of about, what would it be here? 50%. The most conservative, just to give you an idea of how Nate Silver has worked this out, the most conservative in his calculations, Barry Goldwater, at about 68. Scale of 0 to 100, 100 being more conservative, 0 being less. Goldwater is number 1 at 68, but there are a couple of people that are to the right of Goldwater on a couple of things: Rand Paul and Michelle Bachmann. Jeb Bush shows up around, you'd have to say 40%, or 40 out of 100 in terms of how conservative is Jeb Bush, and that's very close to Gerald Ford and Bob Dole, but it's definitely more conservative than Huntsman, Nixon, Condoleezza Rice. He's very close to McCain and Romney and so forth. So that's Silver's point here. Just where does Jeb Bush come? Where does he fall in our analysis of how conservative various Republicans are? And this paragraph is fascinating to me. But is Bush in the mold of Huntsman and Giuliani? What do you need to know beyond the fact that both of them lost? What more is important? Both Huntsman and Giuliani lost the primary races that they entered. They were candidates who did generate a lot of buzz in the East Coast media and in certain elements of the drive-bys, but conservative voters were not interested. Or, it says, is Jeb more like the past two nominees, Romney and McCain? Well, all four of those people lost. That's the takeaway of this paragraph. All four, Huntsman, Giuliani, McCain, Romney, and arguably, well, Giuliani and Huntsman never came close because they got the nomination. Romney and McCain did, but they didn't come close. So we are, in a blog here at 538, we're ranking Jeb Bush against four other men who have lost or failed to succeed in getting a nomination or did get the nomination but lost the election. Now, isn't there a lesson there? The establishment keeps telling us, no, you Tea Party people, look at what happened to Barry Goldwater, but we'll get creamed. You people are extremist kooks. America thinks the Tea Party is a bunch of kooks, and if we have a nominee coming from you, well, we're going to get creamed. We're going to landslide like Goldwater. And, of course, the retort is, yeah, well, the people you are nominating, I don't see a W next to their names at the end of the process. You guys can cite one Barry Goldwater. We can cite every one of your nominees. They lose. Every one of them. But nevertheless, the process continues here to rank Jeb and other Republicans on this imaginary chart of conservatism. And I'll tell you who looks really good on this chart. Let me just cut to the chase here. And not just the chart, but in the article. I'll tell you who looks really good here. Scott Walker. Now, I wonder, does the establishment think Scott Walker is a Tea Party kook? They might. I'm going to tell you something. If the Republican Party has a success story, it's Scott Walker. If the Republican Party has a blueprint, it's Scott Walker. Here is a guy who has withstood the absolute best forms of personal destruction the left can throw at anybody. And he survived 3 attempts. And in addition to surviving, he succeeded in his policy implementations to totally turn upside down the way Wisconsin is run. And he took a dark blue state and made it almost red. I mean, it's not quite. Little purple in there. If you ask me, Scott Walker, I mean, they should have been issuing press releases and videos and little helpful hint videos to other candidates. Here's how you do it videos. Here's how you win. And there's not a word about him. And I just wonder if they think that Scott Walker is too Tea Party at the Republican establishment. I don't know. If I had to guess, based on experience, guided by intelligence, I don't see a lot of excitement for Scott Walker. The excitement at the Republican establishment is Bush, Romney, who else? Christie. That's who they're getting all jazzed about.